Welcome to the ReaderHouse Author Roundtable, where authors from all walks of life come together to discuss the trials, tribulations, and triumphs of publishing their books. I'm your host, Corey Graham. Join us here every Friday night at 8 p.m. or listen anytime via podcast at Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, TuneIn, and PodServe, to name just a few. The Author Roundtable is sponsored by ReaderHouse Online Bookstore, where the independent new authors come first. Trail's End, a Bigfoot Experience. That's the new book, just came out, written by David Nicol, and it's an exciting story, and we get to talk all about it. David is sitting right here with me. David, welcome to the show. Thank you for joining me tonight.
Oh, you're welcome. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. I'm excited to learn about Trail's End, David. Can you tell me what readers are in store for here?
Well, I think it's a tale of adventure and discovery. I spent 2 months out in the Montana mountains, out in the wilderness, all by myself. And I was hiking every day and doing some work on the property that my brother had bought, and just had a lot of experiences that kind of pushed me to write this book.
David, what kinds of readers did you have in mind?
Oh, anybody. Anybody that's into the wildlife or wilderness and outdoors. Obviously Bigfoot enthusiasts.
So what does your writing background look like? Have you ever done anything like this before?
Now, this was my first book. I mean, I'd done some, writing at school like all of us did, but I had always thought about writing a book, and I started to write some dive books. I was a scuba instructor for many years and worked on a lot of conservation projects and whatnot, and I started writing those. And then one of the things I was going to do in the Montana mountains was write those books. Then I got inspired by what I saw out in the woods and wrote Trail's End.
Being your first book, David, did this take you a really long time to write and publish and everything?
Yeah, probably a couple years. A little longer than it probably should have, but it took me a while to actually get the whole story in my mind.
So you got the writing of the book, and you take that manuscript, give it to your publisher, Covenant Books, and start that publishing process. David, what did you find the most challenging part of that publishing end of things for you?
Well, actually, the most challenging part was writing the book. And as far as the publishing process, that went pretty simple. They had a liaison that worked with me, and she helped me through quite a bit of it. The editing and all that. That took time. I guess that was probably the hardest part, just all the time. It took some time.
It must have been a crazy moment for you that day whenever you finally got that first copy in, and there you are, you're holding Trail's End for the first time, and it's a real thing. David, what kind of a moment was that like for you?
It was rather exciting to see what you wrote in print and then your name's on the cover. That's very exciting.
Now you're officially a published author. When you think about that, David, what's the most rewarding thing to you about that?
I guess just the accomplishment, the fact that I finished it and did it, and now it's spurring me on to write more. I'm actually writing a sequel to Trail's End, kind of a sequel prequel.
That's wonderful. That was my next question. Are you thinking about writing more? Have you got that writing bug?
Yeah, I've been working on the sequel now for quite a while, and I should have that finished soon, have them both out there. And like I told you, I had some dive books that I was working on, and I'm getting back to that too. I want to finish those as well, because I have a lot of stories from my diving career.
A lot of the listeners right now are authors just starting out. So, David, is there anything you might have picked up along the way of doing this that you could toss out there for them as some advice?
Make sure you schedule time every day to work on your book. And if you have the ideas, get them on paper. If you got a tape recorder, record what you're thinking so you don't forget about it later. Because I think that's what took me so long sometimes. I didn't always do that. And I think if you jot down those ideas that come in your head, and they don't get lost.
It happens to so many of us authors. It can be the worst. That's writer's block. David, is that something you had to deal with?
Yeah, a couple of times, because I'd get stuck where I wanted the story to go. I had an idea what the finished product I wanted it to look like, but I got stuck at a couple of spots just to write the proper words.
Did you have any kind of strategy that you would do to kind of get those ideas going again?
No, just started writing. When I had those blocks, just write stuff down, and eventually I saw it in front of me.
So oftentimes, a lot of authors I've talked to, they also love to read. That kind of reading, writing goes hand in hand a lot of times. So, David, what kind of a reader are you?
Oh, I read quite a bit. I've read quite a few novels over the years. I like all different kinds of stories.
And I think you were talking about you knew how the story was pretty much going to go. So did you have an outline that you were working on?
Yeah, and that's another thing that you're talking about authors. Put down an outline. It does help quite a bit.
Well, this sounds like an exciting book. I think readers are really going to love it. Again, it's titled Trail's End, a Bigfoot Experience. It's written by David Nicol, published by Covenant Books, and available really everywhere: Amazon, Barnes & Noble, iTunes, and traditional brick-and-mortar stores. David, it's been great talking with you. Thanks again for being here on the show with me.
Yeah, me too, and thanks again for having me.
Author Nancy Ballinger has a new book out titled Little Johnny Stories, and it's a collection of childhood adventures. We get to talk all about it. Nancy is right here with me now at the ReaderHouse Author Roundtable. Nancy, welcome. Thank you for joining me here.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. And Nancy, can you tell me what readers are going to find whenever they open up Little Johnny Stories?
Oh, yes. They're going to find a collection of 10 different stories about a very inquisitive little boy. He's going to get involved in all sorts of different things that typical children do, like his first day of school, losing his first tooth, learning to ride a bike, and those sorts of things. And you'll get to see how he and his parents navigate through those situations. He's quite humorous at times, so I hope the readers really enjoy him.
What sorts of readers are those? What did you have in mind?
Well, typically, Little Johnny is written for your elementary, probably lower elementary age, even younger, even before school age, if the parent reads the book to the child. Actually, Little Johnny came about because my husband and I told our daughter bedtime stories, and she was an only child, so we kind of invented the character Little Johnny to be the person that, let's say she got into trouble one day. Instead of saying, you didn't do this, you should have done this, that night, Little Johnny would experience something very similar, and she was able to look at that and maybe laugh at what Little Johnny did, whereas it might be difficult to laugh at herself. So that's kind of my hope, is that parents and grandparents would share these as bedtime stories or anytime they have time with their child, and it just opens up conversations to discuss, problems and feelings that they may have that the parents might not even be aware of.
So was there a spark there? Was there anything in particular that made you say, hey, I want to collect all these stories we've been telling and put them in a book, get it published?
I am a retired first grade teacher, so I've always had a love for reading. I've always had a love for storytelling. I always wanted to write children's books. I spent so much of my adult life reading children's books to other children and enjoying them, and I always wanted to do my own. And Little Johnny, because he was just kind of a part of our family, it was a no-brainer, to say, hey, maybe that would be a good idea. Actually, my husband is the first one that suggested maybe you should write them down instead of just having them be a story that's told. It can be something that can be handed down to other generations.
So this is your first book then?
Yes, this is my first book, but I'm currently working on another.
Fantastic.
It's another Little Johnny. This one is going to be just a single story about Little Johnny learning the true meaning of Christmas. I feel like in today's society, our Christmas has gone completely away from the true meaning, and I think sometimes we need that gentle reminder that we need to keep it in perspective and really remember that it's about the birth of Christ and not about all of the other things. As much fun as the other things can be, we need to stay grounded and realize that, we are celebrating Jesus' birth.
So once you got started on Little Johnny Stories, you wrote it, you got it published. Was this whole thing a long journey for you?
Really, it didn't take a terribly long time to write them because I just kind of wrote the way that I told them. Going back and editing and making sure that it made sense to another reader, that took a little bit longer. And then once it was submitted and accepted, then the work really began. And that was probably the most surprising thing to me. I guess I just thought that once an author wrote a book, they were pretty much finished with it once they submitted it. I had no idea how involved it would be. And it's been a learning experience for me. And hopefully with all of the future books that I plan to do, I won't be surprised by that process.
Well, again, this book is titled Little Johnny Stories. It's written by Nancy Ballinger and published by Christian Faith Publishing, so you can find it everywhere, really places like Amazon or Barnes & Noble or iTunes, and also traditional brick-and-mortar stores. Nancy, thanks again for coming on the show and telling me all about this. It was really great talking with you tonight.
Thank you so much. It was great talking to you as well.
I'm looking at a book now that's a discussion of global prophecy. It's written by Luis Munoz, and it's titled The Case for Biblical Antichrist, Global Government, and the Man Chosen to Save America. Luis is right here with me now, and we're going to talk all about it. Luis, welcome to the show. Thank you for being here with me.
Well, thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Luis, what are readers going to find in here?
Well, I wrote this book for three main reasons. Firstly, I'm making the compelling case for the biblical Antichrist and long-awaited Mahdi of Islam. You know, the Islamic people, they are also around the time when the Christians are waiting for the second coming of the Lord Jesus. They are also waiting for their radical Muslim Mahdi, who will lead a global caliphate. I am proving that sinister man is none other than Barack Hussein Obama. I'm using 6 chapters in my book to prove that Obama is the biblical Antichrist and Mahdi of Islam. And I'm also saying that Obama is a man possessed by an evil desire to tear down America. That is precisely his mission. In fact, I'm saying in my book that the actions of Obama and Biden prove that they are the worst of the worst liars, deceivers, traitors, criminals, and enemies of American democracy. I know that this is a strong language, but I'm proving that that is the case. And I'm proving in my book that Obama's actions have proven that he is nothing but a wolf in sheep's clothing, a camouflaged radical Muslim, a traitor, and America's number one enemy, a sham, a shameless fraud. And I'm using, as I said, 6 long chapters to prove that. Secondly, I'm presenting irrefutable evidence that there is a global plot to establish an authoritarian world government. And to that end, for a long time, the global mafia, as I call it, has been using the greatest democracy in the world to create the worst tyranny of the history of the world here in America. Therefore, this book exposes the globalist plot to put the United States under a global tyranny. But there is another reason I wrote this book, and this is the third reason. I wrote this book to demonstrate that God chose former President Donald J. Trump to stall the globalist agenda for global government and save America until the rapture of the church occurs. Therefore, I'm using this book, my book, to rally support for the re-election, which is over, but this book got out before the November election. One of the purposes of writing and publishing this book was to use it to rally support for the re-election of former President Trump. It will also help to galvanize America and the world around Trump after his November 2024 electoral victory. I knew he would win. Trump's fight to defeat the globalist agenda for global government must be a collective effort. So my book is a sort of manifesto to help achieve that goal.
And how long of a process was this for you? The writing of it and the publishing, all of that?
It was a little over 2 years.
Again, this book is titled The Case for Biblical Antichrist, Global Government, and the Man Chosen to Save America. It's written by Luis Munoz and published by Christian Faith Publishing, so find it in places like Amazon or Barnes & Noble or iTunes, and also traditional brick-and-mortar stores. Louis, thank you again for coming on the show and chatting with me tonight. It was really great talking with you.
Thank you. It was my pleasure.
I'm looking at a new book right now written by Talic Murphy. It's an exploration of hidden biblical truths and divine revelation. It's titled The Ruah of Yah, God's Ancient Word. We're going to be talking all about this right now. The author Talic and his wife Linda are right here with me now. Welcome to the show, Talic and Linda. Thank you so much for joining me tonight.
Hey, thank you so much, Corey. We really appreciate you inviting us on the show.
Thank you.
Absolutely. It's exciting to be learning all about the Ruah of Yah. Talic, can you tell me what the book's all about?
Well, the Ruah of Yah, in the process of putting it together, it brings in the ancient text of Enoch, and it brings in the biblical text of the Holy Bible of the Scriptures. It connects them together. It brings like a match made in heaven. It brings an extension of the story. And it shows how God revealed all things first to Enoch. And this is not to minimize any of the current apostles and disciples within the Holy Scriptures. I'd liken to Father revealing things to Paul and John, Matthew and James. He also revealed things to Enoch. However, the interesting aspect of it was Enoch was never included in the Holy Scriptures. And so this allowed me the opportunity to be able to expand on the truth of the ancient prophet Enoch and how God revealed everything first to him.
And when you think about the target readers that you were going for here, who would you say that is?
Now, this is an interesting question because when I had asked Father who the specific reading was for, he revealed to me that it was for the lost tribes of Israel. Now, I know such a term, we wonder where they are. Are they even still existing? But what I've come to learn is that my actual heritage after doing an ancient origin DNA is that I'm actually descended from the tribe of Judah and the tribe of Levi right here in America.
So how did this book come about? How did this idea sprout?
I struggled in some areas in my life, and I found that I made some hard choices, which brought me to, I ended up in jail. I found that the decisions that I made I didn't end up anywhere. I realized that I just wasn't taking myself in the right direction. And so I needed to lean on someone who would be able to help me. And I realized that that person was God. After I got out of jail that day, I surrendered my life to him, and he began to reveal to me various aspects through his word. I began to study from the Old Testament to the New Testament, and he began to just reveal to me Enoch and various aspects of who he was. And I didn't really understand specifically why he was revealing it to me, but it was something about the inspiration of how the Holy Spirit began to talk to me, revealing to me that there were some things that was missing. Father said that within his Holy Scriptures that we were never supposed to remove anything or add to it. And so this was an opportunity for me to be able to show the validity and credibility of Enoch and how when it comes to his scripture, when it comes to the scriptures within the book of Enoch, you'll notice is that whenever the chapters would start or a story would start, it would start with a scripture from Enoch. Then it would follow into various scriptures throughout the New Testament and Old Testament. And it would show how it comes together. It expands on the story. And it's really interesting because it shows a lot of hidden truths when you really, really begin to look into it, read into it, and gain a depth of understanding by it.
So, Linda, when Talic came to you and said, hey, I'm going to write this book, I have an idea for a wonderful book, what was your take on the whole thing?
Well, of course, I had no idea it would be anything like this. He started out writing his testimony, starting with his childhood and going back through and how he came to know the Lord and what the Lord had done in his life. And all of a sudden, he put that aside and started this other work, which I had, as I said, no idea that it would be anything of the volume that it is. So I was pretty amazed. And when I saw it finally in its beautiful form, everything from the front cover to every verse in it, I was thrilled.
Again, the title of the book is The Ruah of Yah, God's Ancient Word. It's written by Talic Murphy and published by Christian Faith Publishing, so you can find it at places like Amazon or Barnes & Noble or iTunes or right down the street at your local bookshop. Talic, Linda, it's been absolutely wonderful speaking with you here tonight. Thank you again for being on the show.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Corey. It's truly been a pleasure. God bless you.
Sex, Soul Ties, and the Word. It's the new book written by Bre Aunna Parnell. It's a true story about addiction, spiritual healing, and the power of Jesus. And that's what we're going to be talking about right now. Bre Aunna is right here with me now. Bre Aunna, welcome to the ReaderHouse Author Roundtable. Thanks for being here.
Hi, I'm so honored to be on today.
Well, it's great to be talking with you and great to be finding out about sex, soul ties, and the word. So, Bre Aunna, can you tell me what readers are in store for?
Yes. So the book is actually more so of what I like to call a memoir. So it's a little bit of my experience with the Word of God. So the Bible and also the Spirit, as well as just personal experiences that I've had growing up with lust and soul ties and things that are kind of wrapped into those categories.
Would you say your primary audience for this would be those who are dealing with those sorts of issues?
Oh, absolutely. And I think it is a book, but I like to refer to it more as a guide because it is kind of my story and the things that I went through and some of the things I was able to overcome, but there's also a writing side to where you can write in it and kind of jolt your thoughts down and go step by step into how you can start to overcome some of these things, or more so for the reader.
So how did this come about, Bre Aunna? How'd you get the idea to start on this?
It started out as just me kind of getting my thoughts out on paper. I am a reader at heart, so I've always loved to read and write. And one day I just kind of started writing things down, a little bit of what I was going through. And it was more sort of personal at the time. And one day I just thought to myself, what if this became an actual kind of guide for other people, a book to help other people who may feel like they're stuck? Because it is a very profound and big topic. Sex, lust, soul ties, being intertwined with someone who maybe isn't really good for you or somebody who doesn't have the same faith as you. And just knowing that it is possible to come out of what you feel like is undoable.
You're talking about how you love to write. So have you been published prior to this?
I have not. No, this is my very first one.
Congratulations. So was this a really long process for you, the writing and the publishing, all of that?
I actually would say I wrote the book in about a year, which kind of seems like a long time, but it kind of went by pretty fast for me. And the publishing process, it's been pretty much a year also. So I would say 2 years total, maybe about a year and a half for the publishing part. But for the most part, it was pretty smooth.
A lot of new authors can be surprised at what's involved in the publishing end of things. So what did you find the most challenging part of that for you?
Possibly the edits. And just making sure that my words make sense and they're coming off correct to my audience that I'm speaking to.
So this was several years in the making, so much work went into this, and then that day came, open up the mailbox, and there it finally was, the first copy, and you're holding this in your hands for that first time. Bre Aunna, what was that like for you?
It honestly has been a total dream of mine to write a book, and I always knew that I would write one, but truly to open up the package and hold it in my hand, I tell people it's kind of like my baby. It's the biggest thing I've ever done in my life thus far. It's just a really good feeling to know that it was hard work and all of the stepping stones that I took to really get here.
What are the chances, do you think, that we'll be seeing more from you here in the future?
I would say you will definitely be seeing more of me in the future. I'm thinking about a follow-up as well as just other ideas that have blossomed into my mind over the past couple of weeks and even months.
Well, it sounds like this is going to help and encourage an awful lot of readers. Again, the name of the book is Sex, Soul Ties, and the Word. It's written by Bre Aunna Parnell and published by Christian Faith Publishing. So find it places like Amazon or Barnes & Noble, iTunes, and also traditional brick-and-mortar stores. Bre Aunna, it's been wonderful talking with you tonight and learning about this book. Thanks again for being on the show.
I want to thank you so much for your time as well. I'm so honored.
Right now, I'm looking at the new book by Dr. Glenn A. Clearie. It's titled The Normal Diet. It's book 1 in the Normal Health series. And so we're going to be talking all about this book. Glenn, the author, is right here with me. Glenn, welcome to the ReaderHouse Author Roundtable. I appreciate you being here with me tonight.
Hey, thank you so much for having me, Corey. I appreciate you. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Glenn, can you tell me all about the normal diet and what readers are going to get into here?
Well, I got to tell you, The Normal Diet is my first publication in this genre. It's really made for anybody who eats and drinks. Now, I know that's kind of comical, but it's clearly about diet, as the title suggests, and human consumption and nutrition. But it's really written like a conversation among friends, and it probably has more than a little bit of functional psychology behind it. So it's an easy read, and I really think it leaves you better than where it found you.
So how did this come about? What sparked you to get started on this, Glenn?
You know, I've been in private practice now as a chiropractor for, I guess it's coming up on 27 years. And we just see a boatload of patients, and we do a lot of nutrition. I always have. I've done a lot of continuing education courses. I put on continuing education courses. So I've done a lot with all different types of diet fads, and all different things that people have done, kind of mainstream and a little bit nutty. And I see what works, and I see what doesn't. And through it all, you start building your experiences, some of your own that you have, but mostly my patients. I really wrote this book for my patients and people out there who need help. I think it's a home run. It's easy to read, but more than that, it's effective, and it really has a very good perspective on food.
Now, you're obviously very knowledgeable about this. Was this a quick thing for you to write, or was this a longer process for you?
Well, I got to tell you that at any given time, I am either writing or proofing some type of work. And it all started back when I was in elementary school. I did a piece, believe it or not, way back then, and I was chosen to represent my elementary school up at Rutgers University in New Jersey. And
oh, wow.
I got to tell you, yeah, my parents were pretty impressed. And, and then as I went through my life, when I was in college, and I did happen to go to Rutgers University, I remember one of the English professors, she actually approached me, and she didn't believe that I had written this one piece because she thought it was so good. And I had to fight through that, and that's a longer story. But as I got into private practice, like I said, I've been in practice 27 years, I realized just how much I love to write. And it's been about 25 years now. I've maintained a consistent health column in the local newspaper, and it's called Natural Perspectives. And I've published, well over 700 articles in that paper. And so I've been writing now for so long. It's just kind of who I am. It's a passion of mine, and I just love doing it.
And once you write the book, you hand that manuscript off to your publisher, to Christian Faith. You start that whole publishing process. What did you find the most challenging part about that for you?
Well, Christian Faith Publishing has been tremendous, and working with the editors and everyone involved has been nothing short of just fantastic. But I took a longer time to get this to market, if you will, because I'm not sure how I wanted to come out of the gate. Book 1 is The Normal Diet, is in my Normal Health series, but I have a whole series of publications that are just right behind it. So with this first book, I'm really getting the lay of the land, Corey, about how you do the things, what really works from, bringing it from concept to market. And now that I understand that more fully, I think you're going to see more books and publications come out to really help people and change their lives.
When that finished product was finally there, when you were holding The Normal Diet in your hands for that first time, and your name's on the cover and everything, it had to be a crazy moment, Glenn. What was that like?
I think you hit the nail on the head. And when I was holding it in my hand, I thought to myself, it begins. And there's so much more that I feel we can offer and really share with, this growing community of people who just want normal health.
Well, what an important book. What an important series. If you're listening right now, definitely go check this out. Again, this book is titled The Normal Diet. It's written by Dr. Glenn A. Clearie, published by Christian Faith Publishing, so it's really available everywhere, like Amazon or Barnes & Noble or iTunes, also traditional brick-and-mortar stores. Glenn, thank you so much for coming on the show. It was really great talking with you tonight.
Hey, great. Thank you so much, Corey. It's an honor.
Author Lisa Wilson returns to the ReaderHouse Author Roundtable with me with a guide that empowers readers to explore Paul's letters for 10 minutes a day. The name of the book is Faith. Discover your worth in truth by faith. We get to talk all about this. Lisa is here with me. Lisa, welcome to the show. It's great to be talking with you again.
You as well. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Lisa, can you tell me all about faith and the kinds of things that you've written about here?
Yeah. Faith is a Bible study that I wrote for busy people, as you were mentioning. The number one reason that people claim they don't read the Bible and don't study the Bible is because they lack time. And I get that because we're all super busy. And if you try to fit it in at the end of the day, there's no time left. And you try to do it in the morning, but you got a million things on your mind. I wrote this in such a way that it can be done in 10 minutes or less. And if you miss a day, it's okay. There's no catch-up time. You just pick it up wherever you left off. Just put a bookmark in it and just come back to it. I just love the way God used it by using Paul's letters to show us these affirmations that I used in the first two books, which is what helped me discover my worth to begin with. And then the second book of Truth it's all about the 40-day devotion that takes those affirmations one day at a time. So it really ties it all together in this discovery series. And because it's titled Faith, Paul talks a lot about walking by faith in these letters from Romans through 2 Thessalonians. It's just an exciting time for me to be able to be a part of something that Paul did as he instructed and corrected and redirected the churches. They were new to Christianity. They didn't exactly know what they were doing. They had lots of questions. And when he went there and started these churches, most of them, he started himself. He wasn't there long. Look at how long we've been in church, and we still have questions. So I just love how we could take them one chapter at a time and really look at it and dig deeper and maybe take it into our day, and maybe while we're driving or taking a shower, think about it more, because that's how I wrote it. It's read about it. So you just pick your favorite Bible and then read that chapter. And then I do a little commentary. And then it says to think about it. And it gives an idea what to think about. And then it gives another page to write about it, whatever it is that comes into your mind. Hopefully this will help people put it into their day a little easier.
Considering all the deep topics that Paul covers in the New Testament, Lisa, did this take you a long time to write?
This was years coming, because I had people for a long time asking me, what devotions do you do? What Bible studies do you do? And when I was young and I got saved, I was the only one in my household that knew the Lord, and I had to learn how to feed myself really young. And I just started reading from cover to cover, and I just keep reading. And somebody once told me, if you have questions, just keep reading because the answers are in there. So I just keep reading. And it was just something that for a long time, they don't preach a lot from Paul, from the pulpit. They might preach like Philippians 4, which is all about joy. It's pretty easy to preach on. But they don't go into some deep context, and I get that. But that doesn't mean that we shouldn't. And so it was something that helped me discover my worth in the beginning. And the more I see, especially young people, what I went through in my youth is probably nothing compared to what they're going through now. And it was devastating to me back then. I had attempted suicide.
Wow.
It was just that traumatic and life-changing for me to know who I am in Christ, what my worth is. And then to take that and learn how to help your emotional, spiritual, psychological, even social self insert these truths into who you now are becoming, because that's a lot of what it is just learning who we are in Christ.
Does it ever get tough for you when you're writing? Do you ever get writer's block or anything like that?
What's hard, I think, is like the book Worth, where you're writing about your own personal experiences. That's hard for me because you have to be so vulnerable in order to be truthful, in order to be helpful. But when you're writing something that is the Holy Spirit, because it's the Bible, no, that doesn't happen to me.
What a wonderful book. What a wonderful series. I encourage you, if you're listening right now, definitely check these out. This book is titled Faith. Discover Your Worth in Truth by Faith. It's written by Lisa Wilson and published by Covenant Books. So, again, find it everywhere. Places like Amazon and Barnes & Noble and iTunes, and right down the street at your local bookshop, too. Lisa, once again, it has been fantastic talking with you. Thanks again.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it.
My Journey Through A Course in Miracles. It's the new book written by J.G. Morphis, and it documents the author's own extraordinary journey. We're going to be talking all about it. The author, John, is right here with me. John, welcome to the show. I really appreciate your time tonight.
Oh, thank you very much. I'm glad to be here.
Can you tell me all about my journey through A Course in Miracles and what readers are going to find here?
Well, basically, the book, it's actually a book written about a book called A Course in Miracles. It's a 3-volume experience with the text. The second half is 365 lessons, one lesson for every day of the year, and then there's a manual for teachers. Now, I started reading this book in the early 80s, approximately 40 years ago, and I've been studying it for that long. Basically what it is, if you take the Bible and what the Bible teaches you, the Bible is meant for a different mentality that was around at that time when it was written. This book is written specifically by Jesus Christ. It's authored by Jesus, and it's kind of a long story, and I'm not going to go real into it too far, but 2 professors from the East Coast, one of them started getting these visions, and they were both atheists and agnostics, and all of a sudden, she started getting all these visions and dreams, and the other guy, her other professor, he helped her put it all down into this book. So this book is basically, it takes over from the Bible, dealing more with the mentality that's around now in this time and in this era of the world. It basically offers you an extensive view of why you're here and what your purpose truly is here on this plane, and actually explains where you're going to go when it's all over with, what heaven is. It explains everything. But the book itself is an extremely difficult read. I started reading the book in the 80s, and it took me 5 years before I actually could make sense of what it was,
wow,
what I was reading. I read the text 3 times, and if you look at my book, the book that's on the cover of that, I made a picture of it. I almost underlined every every page, and it's like 1,000 pages, just the text alone.
Wow.
So what I've done basically is I've taken the text, and I paraphrased a lot of it, but I've also given my insights, conjecture, and opinion on some of these issues in there because it's extremely hard to understand. And so the reader, hopefully somebody that's interested in looking at their spiritual self, will get an idea with my book as to what A Course in Miracles really is. And then after reading my book, they may decide, hey, I want to go check this out and actually get the book and read the whole thing. It's published by a Foundation for Inner Peace, and I had to get their permission to paraphrase a lot of the stuff that I wrote from the course. But the book I wrote from is the earliest version, and it's in public domain now, so you can actually paraphrase quite a bit of it just as long as you get their permission. So that's basically it in a nutshell.
So this is a book you've been studying for literally decades. So what sparked you to write your book at this point in time?
The fact that because it took me so long, new people coming into this book, if you look around, there's no advertisements for A Course in Miracles. You won't see anything about it on TV. You won't see anything about it in libraries. It's a worldwide book, but it's just not very known. And my intention was to get it out there so more people can be exposed to it and start to change their lives and recognize that this world is not all about just material things and what we can get and grab for ourselves. So it's a brotherhood of all of us together, learning to be one brother and move forward back towards God, where we originally came from.
And I can imagine once you got started writing this, this would have taken you a while, considering all the research and everything that went into it. Is that the case?
It took me over a year to put it all together.
Then you hand that manuscript off to your publisher, Newman Springs. You start that whole publishing process. There's a lot involved there. What do you find the most challenging part about that publishing end of things?
Well, I was kind of surprised by that as well, because once I had turned everything over to them, which would have been around this time last year, it took almost a whole year for them to get it out. It's just now getting marketed, as a matter of fact. I guess that would be the most challenging thing, was that it took almost a year to get it in the stores.
Again, this book is titled My Journey Through A Course in Miracles. It's written by J.G. Morphis and published by Newman Springs Publishing. So you can get it everywhere, places like Amazon and Barnes & Noble and iTunes and traditional brick-and-mortar stores. John, thanks again for coming on the show and telling me all about your work. It was really nice chatting with you tonight.
Same here. I really appreciate you having me, and thank you.
Looking at a book right now, it's a collection of personal poems and reflections written by Fancy Joy. It's titled Life Changes, an inspirational book about life, loss, and love. And we're going to be talking all about it. Fancy is right here with me now at the ReaderHouse Author Roundtable. Fancy, welcome to the show. Thank you for joining me.
Thank you very much.
I'm curious about life changes, Fancy. What can readers get into here?
It's a whole bunch of poems I've written over the years, ever since I was younger, and all of my emotions and feelings, I put them in poems. I'm not very good at speaking, but I can always tend to type things out. So I even wrote a poem about it. There's a poem in there about how I speak better with my fingers than I do with my mouth.
So what inspired you? What gave you the idea to collect your poetry and publish it?
Actually, it was my husband. He encouraged me, and I wrote a lot of poems about him, and then we combined them into a book to share with everybody.
Were there specific readers that you might have had in mind, people you think would really enjoy this the most?
I think it's good for everybody. If people are grieving, it helps them a lot, I think, because my first husband, I was married to for 30 years, and he got cancer, and he was bedbound for 18 months, and I took care of him at home until he finally passed away. And then my second husband, we dated, actually. Before my first husband, we dated 30-some years ago, and then he broke up with me, and then I met my husband and married him, and 2 years after my first husband passed away, I reconnected with my soulmate that I had dated 30-some years ago, and now we're married. So I want people to know that hard times come and life changes whether you want it to or not. Sometimes it changes drastically in the blink of an eye, and you know, like all of a sudden my husband had cancer and he was dying, and you might not have control of that, but you can control how you handle it, and that you will get through it. You might not get over it, but you will get through it, and you're not alone. And some of the poems are about relationships and dealing with other people, and how I think we're all the same. We have to remember that everybody is a person and everybody has feelings.
Now, when it comes to publishing and writing books and everything, Fancy, are you new to all of this?
Yes, that's my first attempt.
Oh, congratulations. So once you decided to collect your poetry and put it in that manuscript format, was that a long process? Was that tough for you?
No, once I got going, it actually went pretty fast. I think it was about a year or so till I got it all published.
And once you were working with the publisher Covenant Books, what did you find the most challenging thing about all those hoops you got to jump through in that publishing process?
The patience. Not as quick as you think sometimes,
right.
But it's all for a wonderful end result, you know, so you want to make sure everything is the way you want it to be and the way it's going to be easy for people to read because you're so excited, right?
Yeah. And there's nothing like seeing that end result, finally holding that finished product in your hands. So when you got your first copy of Life Changes and it was a real thing and you're holding it, Fancy, what was that like for you?
It was incredible. I couldn't believe it. It was exciting. It was scary because I was like, oh, man, what am I doing? I was very proud that I actually went for it and did it and actually followed through. You know, some of us are kind of procrastinators and we say we're going to do something and we don't do it and we think about it. Oh, yeah, that would be good.
Right.
But you know what? You got to go for it. You got to do it. If you don't, you'll be sorry. You know, you'll regret that. What's that saying that people say, you know, you don't regret the things you did, but you regret the things you didn't do, or whatever that saying is.
I'm sure you learned a lot along the way of doing this for the first time. So is there maybe anything in the way of advice that you could throw out there for the aspiring authors that are listening to us?
I would have to say, just be patient, go for it. Mostly just do it. Just go for it. And make sure that if you love your book, other people will love it too, and don't be afraid to put yourself out there.
Well, it sounds like an awful lot of readers are going to be inspired and encouraged by these poems. Again, the title of it is Life Changes, an inspirational book about life, loss, and love. This is written by Fancy Joy, published by Covenant Books, and really available anywhere like Amazon and Barnes & Noble and iTunes, and also traditional brick-and-mortar stores. Fancy, it's been great talking with you tonight. Thanks again for coming on the show and telling me all about your work.
Thank you very much.
Author Calvin Edward Ballard, Sr. has written a new book titled Number 5 of 12. It's a story about his life from birth up until now, We're going to find out all about this book. Calvin is here with me now at the ReaderHouse Author Roundtable. Calvin, welcome. Thank you for joining me.
Thank you very much.
I'm curious about number 5 of 12, Calvin. Can you tell me what this is all about?
Yeah, well, it's a story of a child that was born in a large family of 12 children, 6 boys and 6 girls, lived on a small farm in a small country town. Large family that gave a lot of support, helping him to maintain and develop interest in different phases of his life.
What sorts of readers did you have in mind for this, Calvin?
Well, it's for anyone who wants trying that may go through life thinking if you're born in a certain area that your life is limited to that area. It shows that when you're reading it, that life can be made outstanding, basically, if you take and practice what you've learned as you grow up.
So how did this book come about, Calvin? How did you get the idea to get started on it?
Well, I had a slight injury, and I was sitting at home, and I started writing about 3 years ago. And then I let it go. Then I picked it back up after my little nerve injury and went on and just started putting things together, remembering how I was raised and the people that inspired me, and just put notes together. And then finally it all started coming together, then going back in history as far as I could remember, and bringing that so I could show people that family is the big basis of all life. You got a good family, you can make excellent livelihood.
So when it comes to writing and publishing and everything, Calvin, is this your first time at it, or do you have experience doing this?
No, this was my first time. I had my family, my wife stood behind me and talked to her a lot about what I had planned before I actually started in the publishing thing. Then went online and looked up all the different publishing companies, about 5 of them, and then wrote to them and sent copies, and finally decided to pick the one that I thought fit my needs the best.
Yeah, once you hand that manuscript off and you start that whole publishing process, there's an awful lot involved there. Calvin, what did you find the most challenging part about that publishing end of things?
Waiting and hoping that it is finally the finished product. You see that. That is the thing that you're so anxious saying, oh my gracious, it seems like it's taken forever. But then you go back and say, well, hey, Rome wasn't built in a day, so just wait patiently. Luckily, I had a company that kept in contact with me through email that made things a lot easier. But the urge of having it completed is the big part.
And there is nothing like seeing that finished product after all that time, that hard work that you put into it. So when you're finally holding this for the first time, Calvin, what was that like?
Oh, I tell you, it's like when you first open a Christmas present. Even though you're a lot older, but when I first got the first books come to me, even though my representative had told me, but when I saw the first book, it was something that, oh my God. It has finally been completed. It was overwhelming, and I just started calling and texting my family, letting them know, and all of them were happy for me. That was the greatest thing when I saw the first finished product.
And now you're officially a published author. To you, what's the most rewarding aspect of that?
I've had people call me and ask me about it, especially about my theory and philosophy of life. The credit I give all was one to my grandmother, my mom and dad, and the farm town that I worked around the whole time of my childhood until I reached adulthood.
What are the chances we might see some more books from you in the future, Calvin? Have you given that some thought?
Yes, I've thought about it, and I started putting a few little notes together, which would bring my life up to the current.
What a great message. I think readers are really going to love this book. The title again is number 5 of 12. It's written by Calvin Edward Ballard, Sr., and published by Newman Springs Publishing. So get it at Amazon, Barnes & Noble, iTunes, traditional brick-and-mortar stores, really anywhere that you usually pick up your books. Calvin, thank you again. It's been really wonderful chatting with you tonight.
Thank you very much for giving me the opportunity.
We hope you enjoyed this edition of the ReaderHouse Author Roundtable, where authors from all walks of life come together to discuss the trials, tribulations, and triumphs of publishing their books. We hope to see you back here every Friday night at 8 p.m. or listen anytime via podcast at Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, TuneIn, and PodServe, to name just a few. The Author Roundtable is sponsored by ReaderHouse Online Bookstore, where independent new authors come first.